Hello everybody, happy Wednesday, happy scoping out. I'm so glad that you're here. Happy fall. I hope you're having a beautiful autumn. We sure are here in colorful Colorado, and boy, there is no other time than autumn to remind you why we are called colorful Colorado. One trip to the mountains and your mind is blown, breath is taken away, and all that wonderful stuff. But we're not talking about that today. Today we are talking about closure. And how do you know when you're really finally done with your baggage and your garbage and your stories? Last week I talked about going from root canals to revelations. And I know it was some high level conversation about what happens to those stories as they dissolve and the environment that they have to sort of exist in so that you can say goodbye to them and put closure on them. And a lot of you had questions about that. Probably because a lot of you haven't been there, and that's completely okay. I had never been there before this either. So this whole idea of really saying goodbye to the stuff, the baggage, the old emotional stories, the things that cling to you from your life experiences, we say goodbye to them over and over and over again, don't we? And then we get into a whole new environment, and those beasts rear their ugly heads again, and we go, God dang it, I thought I dealt with this. And it's interesting because for me personally, I've always thought about it as existing on a spiral. Rather than thinking about it linearly, I think about it as existing on a spiral. So if this issue exists, this issue exists, this issue exists, and this issue exists, I'm going to keep hitting those sides every time I'm coming up that spiral, right? I'm going to keep hitting them. I'm just going to hit them a little differently. I'm going to experience them in a slightly new way. Hopefully with some more wisdom, hopefully with some insight that's going to help me resolve them and take ownership of where my story is and where my work is. Because the last thing in the world we want to do is take an unresolved story and project it onto someone else. So let me give you an example. All of you know, if you've been coming to these for a while, and I'm embarrassed to say because I'm the life coach, right, that is helping people with these, but guess what? I'm human as well. I noticed for a long time I had a very negative man story, But the thing is, I owned it. I know that it's not true about men. It is true about my belief about men. So the very first story, or the very first step to understanding any possibility of getting closure, is understanding that the outside world is not going to change. Everybody else out there, they are fallible. They are dealing with their own shit. They are not on the hook to help you deal with yours. And that's not to say that they won't and they don't play a part. Usually the part they play is as a reflection for the work you have left to do, okay? So don't ever put that responsibility on the world to change, or for somebody else to show up differently, or for somebody else to show you that there is something different and it's not you. No, that's not their job. Your job is to own your story. So step one for really putting these things to bed is taking ownership for your part. And it's all your part. Period. It is not what is happening in the world that makes you upset, angry, hurt. It is your belief about what is happening in the world that makes you upset, angry, and hurt. Yes? Okay. So that is step one. So as I saw this story in myself, I took full responsibility for it. And then I began to consciously look for proof to the contrary. So whatever my negative man story is, and I had a lot of different layers to it, where am I wrong? Right? Where am I wrong? Where is there? And this isn't like, all right, world, show me. All right, men, show me. It's not that. It is really genuinely coming into it with curiosity and playfulness and going, okay, so I know it's my own belief that has projected this onto men into the world. So in what ways could I be mistaken? And it's not necessarily show me proof of a different kind of man, because you may or may not see that. For it more likely, and for most people, it ends up being an empathetic stance where you flip it. What are men going through? What are their foibles? What are their issues? What creates the situation in them where they behave a certain way en masse, right? And men, you can do the same thing for women, right? So you begin to go out and you're looking for what else is true. Where am I wrong? What else is true? That's step two. So first, own your shit. Second, look for proof to the contrary. Look for the ways that you're wrong. It's kind of a scientific approach, isn't it? And then step 3, find how this is serving you. So for me personally, the more I dealt with my story about men, and that was just one of my issues. If you came to last week's scope, you know there were a lot of them. But if something's coming up for me, how is it perfect? How is me being triggered? How is me having this story perfect? Well, it's showing me new ways to respond. It's giving me practice at that empathetic stance. It's giving me practice at letting go, at forgiving. It's giving me practice at being a better partner to myself and being more present to the work I have to do. And the more I'm present to that, the more I get done in the way that I serve you, in the way that I serve my children, in the way that I serve my business, my community. And then maybe someday, I don't know, a partner. We'll see, right? So that is step 3, is finding out how this is perfect. And then you glom on to that. Because whatever that is in service to you, that is where your work is. And that is where your power is. So the moment you find power in that place where it's perfect is the moment the story just starts to dissolve. It no longer has a hold over you. It's served its purpose. It's showing you your work. You've taken responsibility. You're no longer giving it your stress and your attention and your angst, right? You're no longer giving it the energy of any of that, which means you've forgiven it, taken that energy back. And then in that space, that's where the healing happens. Now, how do you know when done is done? And I've got to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know. I think a lot of these issues are done for me, but how do I really know? All I can tell you, because like I said at the beginning, we can think we've dealt with this stuff, and then years later, it can rear its ugly head again. So how do I know this stuff isn't going to rear its ugly head again? I don't. It might. And the last piece of this puzzle is be okay with that possibility. Because the more you resist that as a potential reality, the more you create that as a potential reality. Does that make sense? It's the whole what we resist persists, right? So if I'm afraid of it coming up, now I'm paying attention to my old story instead of my new story, and the more I pay attention to it, the more my confirmation bias goes out and finds the proof for it, regardless of all of my conscious work on it. So to tell you the truth, I don't know for sure if all of these things are done. I don't know for sure that these things are not going to crop up, but I do know this. Right now, after all of that clearing, after all of that work that I just went through, here's what I'm noticing that's different. When the circumstances arise that used to trigger that story, because those circumstances didn't change, I changed, my belief changed, my attention changed, right? So when those circumstances rise, and when your circumstances rise, and they will, because life hasn't changed, the world's not different, notice what happens for you. Is the chatter in your mind farther in the back? Did it go farther away? Is it not as present? Is it clouded over by a more positive story? Then it's probably going to come up again because it's way back there, right? It's way back in the back of your head. What's different for me this time is I notice that when those circumstances arise, there's nothing. It's quiet. It's quiet in here. It's quiet in here. There's nothing filling up that space. And I'll tell you, it feels like freedom. It feels like there is something that has opened up in me that is allowing me to choose what fills that space. So could I go back to that, what's comfortable? Could I go back to my old story and glom onto that stuff? Sure, I could, right? Because now I've got the space. What do I do with it? I don't know. It's kind of uncomfortable. Instead, I'm just noticing and appreciating that I've got extra bandwidth, that I have extra attention, I have extra energy, that I have extra grace and love and peace. What am I going to do with that? For me, I put it into my business, into the thing that serves you. That's what I choose to do with it. For you, it might be what you put into your home. It might be what you put into your job. It could look different for you. But there's this feeling of like, there's nothing there. Okay. Just sort of this really calm, sweet, kind nothing that's there. So that's what it looks like for me for now. And, I'll keep doing these and we'll find out, a year from now if any of that whole stuff crops up, and we'll readdress this then. But for right now, I want you to go out and try practicing those things. Take ownership. Turn it around. Look for ways that you're wrong. find it the ways that it's perfect. And then that final piece is to just really to become the observer and watch what shifts and changes in you without resisting any of it, resisting the pain, resisting the ease. All of it has its place, and just allowing whatever happens for you to happen for you during this transformation. So I hope that answers your questions. If it doesn't, please stay in touch with me on the blog at triffanyhammond.com/blog, or on YouTube at youtube.com/Triffany Hammond. Your homework is to take ownership, is to look for the perfect in what seems like the impossible, and is to let me know how it's all going. And as of course, I will be keeping you apprised of my situation as well, because we are all in this together, and none of us is exempt or immune from the work it takes to be our best selves that we bring to the world. So go out there, give yourselves a great big hug, create a great week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye, my lovelies.